Welcome to the Christian Romance Podcast, where we go behind the books with inspiring Christian romance authors, exploring faith, love, and the journey that brings the story to life. I'm your host, Kelly Jo Wilson, and today we're chatting with Elizabeth Goddard. Elizabeth is a USA Today bestselling and Christy Award winning author of over 60 novels, including Cold Light of Day, Shadows of Dusk, and the Rocky Mountain Courage and Uncommon Justice series. With over 1.5 million copies sold, she's also a Carol Award and Reader's Choice Award winner, as well as a Daphne du Maurier Award and HOLT Medallion finalist. When she's not writing, she enjoys family time, traveling for inspiration, and serving in ministry with her husband. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the episode so you can hear more about our newest book giveaway for this month. Now, here's my conversation with Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. I am so happy to have you on the Christian Romance Podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
So you have this wonderful new book coming out, but why don't we start with you just letting our listeners know more about you and about how you got on this writing journey. You know, you have had such a love for stories since you were young. And I was looking on your website where you said that your mother used to read stories to you and you used to get really into it. And your third grade teacher read stories. And why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit more about how you had that love and how you got started?
Well, and my writing journey, getting there is one of the long journeys, the longer journey, it took me a long time. But yeah, I think that decades ago, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the TV, we didn't have all of these things. And I think probably, I could be wrong, people did a lot more reading of just novels because that's all there was to do. But yeah, I just grew up in a home where my mom was an avid reader. And I remember we had these two big bookshelves just filled with all kinds of romance novels, horror stories like My Friend Flicka, gothic romance, like from Daphne du Maurier, if I'm even saying her name right, Victoria Holt, Phyllis Whitney. And so, every summer I would just spend reading, and sometimes I would read a book 2 or 3 times. But I remember that my mom had told me that I had written a poem, and she said, and I think I must have been like 7 or 8 years old, and she said, I'm going to send this in. I'm going to send this in. And so I think that was just a little seed that she planted. And to this day, I really thought, oh, she never did send it in. But recently I just started thinking, maybe she did. And I got rejected and she just didn't tell me because she didn't want to break my heart. Anyway, I just went through growing up, love reading. And then I think I wrote my first novel because at some point when you're an avid reader, you just start thinking, hey, I could do this. I mean, some people do, maybe not everyone, but maybe I could write a novel. So I was 14 when I sat down at a typewriter. Not everybody is going to know what, a typewriter, you pounded out 25 pages of a romance novel, kind of like the Harlequin Silhouettes or whatever those really sweet romances they had back then. Very short stories. And I didn't make it past the 25 pages because holy cow, there's just like, I don't even know if I could write a novel now if it was on a typewriter, because there's just so many changes, so many fixes. But I put that aside, and you get busy with life, and you get busy with what I want to be when I grow up, and school, and so I kind of put writing to the background because I didn't have the internet. I couldn't research what could I do with writing. In my mind, it was just Lois Lane from Superman, the reporter, and I didn't want to be Lois Lane, so I just kind of put that aside, that little writing dream, and I had wanted to be like an astronaut, and actually I settled on marine biologist. I really did. And my first 2 years of college, I did that, but then I took scuba and I realized, I'm not doing this, because it was just too terrifying. I failed scuba, I would have to take it again. So I decided, I'm just going to switch to computer science. I know that sounds really strange, but it was the up and coming thing. And I knew, hey, I can support myself with a good job, computer science job. And then I could just learn to scuba dive or do whatever I want, that kind of thing. But, when I look back now and think of my earlier things I wanted to do as a career, it's just, I think I wanted to explore the unknown, right? Because space and the ocean, whatever, explore the unknown. So I do kind of filter that in with my writing. But so I had, in my 20s, I was corporate America, and I was working for a software company in sales and marketing. And I was writing then. I was writing proposals. I was writing marketing literature. So, it's just kind of interesting because it still really fueled, I still was able to use that, whatever's inside of me. I think God puts it inside of you. And that was always inside of me. And it wasn't until I had my first child and I quit the job because I couldn't travel all over the country. I was traveling. And I thought, maybe now's the time to look at writing. The other piece of it is, if you spend so much time going to college and being a career woman, and it's hard to just stop and stay home. So I think it was kind of an entrepreneur spirit in me too. So I wrote like a little children's story. Rachel's like a year old, and I sent it in to some publisher, and I can't remember. I got back a rejection, but because I didn't have a clue what I was doing, there's a protocol, there's a proposal, you send it to the right publisher, all these things. I didn't have a clue. I just sent it off to the first publisher. So, but then from there, I went from trying to figure out, well, did you call me to write, God? I don't know if you called me to write, and I ordered a Writer's Digest correspondence course. I don't even know if they still do that, in today's things, is where they mail you a big book and then you mail things back and forth. And so I had this big giant thing for writing a novel. And I thought, am I going to waste the next 5 years working on this novel and wasting time that I could be spending with my daughter, and then it's not going to get published? And so fast forward quite a few years, and I can look back and say, hey, I did waste that time because I didn't write during that time. I put it aside. But, God, he puts a dream inside of you, and he doesn't let that go. And he just kept coming back. I kept, everywhere I went, I kept seeing that Bible verse, recite, what is it? Oh my gosh, in Psalms, talking about my pen is my voice is the pen of a ready writer. And I should know that off the top of my head, but the one I'm talking about. But I kept seeing it everywhere I'm going. And finally I was like, okay, are you trying to say something to me, Lord? And then I randomly got this thing in the mail saying, hey, has God given you your scripture yet? You're writing scripture? I'm like, well, yes, he has.
As a matter of fact, he did.
So, but I didn't know what to write, articles. I mean, there's so many different avenues, and I just feel like he had called me, but I didn't know what. And so I kept, looking into things, trying things, reading about writing, studying about writing, all these things. And then finally, I just we moved from, I'm a Texan. We were in Texas, East Texas at the time, where all my family is. And I remember thinking, you know what? I can't believe that I thought God called me to write. That's just, I just laughed it off. I mean, I just literally waved my head and just laughed it off. I mean, that was just such a silly thing for me to think that. So we moved to Austin, Texas, and I had 3, my daughter was 8, and then my other 2 babies were 2 and 1. So, and my mother-in-law called and says, you got your writing kit in the mail. Do you want that? I'm like, what writing kit? I don't know what you're talking about. So, but I said, okay, send it. So she sent it, and I thought, okay, Lord, okay. It's like he's just not letting me go. So I ordered a Bible study by Marlene Bagnall, and it was, has God called you to write? It was a study for writers to discover as God's called you to write. And then I signed up for my very first writing conference. It was in Austin, and it was American Christian writers, not American Christian fiction writers. It was ACW. And I signed up to have a meeting with Diane Mills, just to sit down with her and say,
yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah. Hey, did God call me to write? I want to know, but before I even got to that meeting, I knew, I mean, come on, I knew. And it's just like, I knew. And so, that's when it started. So I attended a conference starting in 2001. I signed up. She actually is the one that founded ACFW. At the time,
Mhm.
it was American Christian Romance Writers, ACRW. And I think I was in
Oh.
I was in the first 100 people, maybe. I don't know. So I signed up for that group, and I joined a critique group. And I was in that group with Lisa Harris, trying to think, Tammy
Oh,
Alexander, and
wow.
Debbie Votes. And so there was 2 or 3 more. We were all in there, and it was, sometimes critique groups don't work out, but this one was just such a blessing. We all were
Oh.
so good for each other, and none of us were published. And then as the years went on, all of us became multi-published. So good group. And I remember one of the writers in the group, though, she was an editor, and she was so harsh that I
Mm.
would just make sure that I had double Dutch chocolate chunk ice cream in the freezer before I read her critique. And I would read it, I would eat the ice cream, and it would take me a
It
week
was
or two to get over what she, but that's the thing. You have to have the determination. You have to have,
Mhm.
I'm going to the stick to it. We had other people join the group, and they couldn't take even the slightest critique. And so it was
Mm.
hard, but I made it through, and I stuck with it. So I kept going to conferences, and raising babies. And I think I had one more. So I had 4 children during this whole time. You're going to conference, and even having a baby, and taking, some people take their babies with them. You just keep on going. You just keep
Oh,
on
yeah.
trucking. And at some point, I think it was 2005, 5 or 6. Yeah, probably 2006, maybe. I finally got the email that Heart Song Presents
Oh.
wanted to buy one of my novels. And so that was my first one. It didn't come out till the end of 2007, almost 2008. And then slowly over time, I kind of built up. I wrote a few novellas for their collections. And then eventually I landed in my agent, Steve Lobby, because I've kept going to the conference. You just got to keep going so you can meet
Keep
those
going.
people.
He's
And
wonderful too.
yeah, yeah, and it took me 5 years of going and meeting with him to land here,
5 years in Steve Lobby's face, finally, he's like, "Okay."
So, I mean, just but God opened all the doors in every way, even, for me to land him, because I just was like, I don't know, it just seemed like a miracle to me, put it like that. And it's
Aw.
so funny because I was writing for Love Inspired Suspense. I wrote,
Mm.
starting in 2011, I switched over to the romantic suspense, and still writing for Heartsong Presents, and writing for Annie's Mysteries. And so I wrote for them 30 plus books. I don't know. But in 2017, my dream had always been to write for the trade publishers, for
Mm.
Revell or Bethany. But here I have this big agent, and I never actually pursued that. So one day I was like, Lord, is it time yet? Is that, I just kind of sent this up. I don't know if you just shoot up a little prayer. That's the deepest part of your heart, just shoot it up. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, making sense, but
100%.
I just
Yeah,
felt
for
like, you
sure.
know what? I feel like I just tugged on the strings of his heart that day,
Aw.
because Steve emailed me like in a week and said, he didn't know my prayer, right? But he says, Ravel's looking for romantic suspense. I'm like, oh, so I just kind
That
of
is
knew
so
that
crazy.
was the Lord saying, okay, yes, it is
Aw.
time. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like
Yeah.
everything, and I have left out so much. You just can't even, but I'm just saying that, all the little bitty doors that God's opened along the way. So for me, yes, it's been hard work, and I stick with it, but every step of the way it's just been because God opened that door. And so another door he opened. And of course, I didn't have a proposal for Revell, my dream publisher. So I just worked for 2 weeks. I went, just spent 2 weeks writing it. And when I was done, I looked at it and I was like, yes. It was just that moment where I knew, that this was it. And so as it turned out, I was actually in Ann Arbor, staying in the Ronald McDonald House because my son 2 years before had gotten sick. And so I am in
Mm.
the hospital. I go get to see him, like at breakfast and lunch and dinner. But all the rest of the time, I'm working on this proposal and going back and forth with the editor at Revell to get it perfect and how it needs to be. And so it's like, even in the it's interesting because, it's like God blesses you, but sometimes you're even in very hard places. You still you
Hmm.
doesn't mean we're not going to go through hard stuff, but even in the midst of all the terrible stuff, I still stuck with, the calling, what I feel like he called me to do. And so I just kept on. It's like you kind of have to give him the burden of it, because how do you make it through? How do you do that without, I don't even know how people who don't have Jesus, how did they make it through?
Oh yeah, I
I
know.
don't know. So anyway, so I'm here.
Well, it takes a lot of courage. I mean, you really, definitely don't sell yourself short, but yeah, for sure. It takes a lot of courage to persevere like that because and it's funny because usually, I know I personally will struggle with like, was that God? Was that really him talking to me? Or was that just me? Was that my hope or something? But, he gives us the desires of our heart for sure. And he does fulfill. I mean, that it's so funny that you got that message from Steve Lobby like that same week. And you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah. And so I
hey,
knew, I knew, yeah, I
yeah,
knew,
that's
right.
amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah,
And it is hard, because, especially when you have young children and you're just trying to be a good mom and take care of them and do what you got to do and then be obedient, it's really tough because it's juggling a lot, especially with a sick child. My goodness. It's like the world stops. But well, it's like the world stops for you, but then it doesn't. It just, you have to keep moving
that's
forward
right.
and
It's right.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah,
So I'm so happy that you stuck with it and you had some mentors there because it was, whenever you got started and things, there weren't as many resources as there are
right.
now. Like even
Oh, for
even
sure.
Steve Lobby has on his website, he has like wonderful blog posts and things like that for people to help them write a proposal. Like just looking
Right.
back probably, would have been so helpful years ago, but it's so important too to get among people who are doing what you're trying to do too, because otherwise you just feel like you're on this island, like. And Diane Mills, she's just delightful. I had her on the podcast, and she just has such a heart to help people and to help writers, and she just loves it so much. So she was probably very happy to help you. And like you said, though, it takes a lot of perseverance going through the conferences and meeting different people. And how did you get into because you write these wonderful romantic suspense? Was that something that you were always drawn to, like as a reader, or was it something that you were just like, how did you get involved with the suspense piece of it as opposed to like the sweet romances?
Well, my first book that came out was Seasons of Love, and somebody had reviewed it and said that, wow, this story has a lot of mystery and suspense elements. And
Mm,
so I realized that, I mean, think about it. I was reading the Gothic romances, and they're
right.
lots of suspense and lots of mystery. And so that is what I love to read. I think that it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, maybe a lot of novels, for people to figure out what they want to be when they grow up as a writer, to find their niche. And so that was kind of me. I'm writing for Heart Song Presents, which is mostly romance, but I
Hmm.
really feel the need to bump up the suspense piece of it, the suspense element. And so I fit right in with Love Inspired Suspense, and just, it was easy to pick up that they have a specific voice and rhythm and pace, and really I credit them for teaching me how to write suspense, and they want like 50-50, like a romance and suspense. And so that is what I strive for, even in my Bell novels, is 50-50 romance. So it just it comes naturally. I've tried to look at a lot of different, and we're always learning. We never stop learning. So I will look at different programs and how to increase the suspense and all these different things that I need to do, and mysteries. But at the end of the day, it really is instinct. You've read so many of
Hmm.
these kind of novels, when you need to do this or need to do that. It's just, you have to kind of go by feeling, and yeah, you use everything else to inform you. And maybe I'll go back and look at a beat sheet and say, oh, hey, I missed this beat or something like that, and come back and fix it. But that's what you do. So I feel like I'm in the right place. But it's interesting you should ask that, because when I would go to the conference, originally, I was pitching historical novels.
Oh, were
Historical,
you?
yeah, because I grew up in Texas, and there's just in a little town that was the world's richest acre, like decades ago. And as far as oil, is an oil
Oh,
and
yeah,
and all
that's
this
right.
stuff. And so there's
Yes.
so much rich history there. And I'd been reading historical, what I call historical romantic suspense. But it wasn't until I switched to the next genre, that I started going places. So, you got to figure out, maybe I love to read this, but my voice sounds better here. And I just have a better feel for that. So that goes back to when I said sometimes it takes a while to figure out your niche, because here I am
Mhm.
pitching for several years historical. And I'll just add in, for 2 years I did pitch fantasy.
Did you? Oh,
because
that's so
yes,
fun.
because my daughter had asked, she was like 13. She says, "Mom, can you write me a dragon story?" So for fun, I wrote
Aw.
that. And so
Did
I
you? It's
entered,
really
yeah,
awesome.
I entered it in a contest, and it did better than all of my historical. So I thought, hey, but then, after 2 years of pitching that and no bites, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Then I went back to romance. So, it was just like, you know, trying to figure out, where am I going to fit in? So I am so thankful I finally found the place.
Yes, that's so cool. I love that. Yeah, that's actually pretty popular right now too, like the
Oh, it is.
romantasy, you
Yeah,
know.
but years ago it was just really hard.
Yeah,
It was hard to get in.
I bet, because there's different trends that kind of go too, it's like you could be the greatest author in your genre, and then if they're not, certain publishers are looking for it, or if maybe they just got pitched or they just picked somebody up or something, like they might, say
Right.
no. But you
Yeah.
also touched on something like how you said about your editor, the editor that was with your chocolate ice
Yeah,
cream. I love that you had the control to be like, listen, I'm going to manage myself, and I know I'm going to need some goodies to make me in a good mood, because chocolate will lift my spirits. I think it does that for everybody. I love it.
yeah. Mhm.
And, I think that's so awesome. But it is a really good point. Like, you really have to have a lot of humility when it comes to doing something like this, and you're going through and it's competitive, and you're just trying to be obedient the whole time. And I love that God opened so many doors for you and just showed you, like you said, little tidbits along the way, that you're like following the path that he's wanting to set you
Yeah.
on, because you can start to question stuff. You're like, what am I doing here? Especially whenever you have difficult edits and things like that, which I feel like, it's usually helpful. Sometimes when they're a little extra harsh, it's like, you don't have to be that mean.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But it is helpful if it's honest and they're trying to genuinely make you a better author. But it's good to have chocolate.
Yeah, you have
The
to
takeaway.
take what has merit. And I can honestly say that even now, when I get edits back from my editor, I have, with Revell, I have the initial edit from my main editor, the acquiring editor, and she goes through with, like maybe just the overall story, and then it'll go into another editor, for more details. And so when I get that edit, I'm just like, it's like, it's painful every time. It never
Mm,
goes away, that pain and that fear and and so what you have to do is you kind of read through, you just kind of give yourself a day or two, and then you read through it, and then you give yourself a little more time to think about the answers, because the answers, I don't care how hard they are, they will come. There is always a way to fix the story or change it up. So I learned that really well writing for Love Inspires Suspense, because they have a lot of edits. They even in their proposal stage, even in the proposal, every author that contracts with them, even if you have a contracted book, you have to do a proposal, which is the synopsis, the full
mm,
synopsis in
mm.
3 chapters. And they will go through the synopsis, even say, we don't like this or that. So you've got that. And then you've got your edit of the actual novel. And it's always just a lot of stuff. And so, you know, it's really helped me to have done so many edits. But it's funny that it's still painful to me, or, it's still like, oh, I just kind of seize up whenever I get the email to say, here it is, because, did you like it or not like it?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And then you see the red and the track changes, right? And you're like, oh
Yes.
man, that's too
I'm
much
like,
red. I
yes.
gotta get Some
Yeah.
chocolate.
And then, but you have to take a step back from your story, and need someone else with fresh eyes
Yeah.
to look at it, and a lot of times the stories that I've written, a lot of it's still in my head that I didn't get on the page. And then my editor will say, I don't know what you're talking about. And sometimes I will even say, I don't either.
I
I don't
know.
know what I was talking about.
I know. It's definitely helpful, but it does make the process daunting, and it does make you have to be very humble throughout the stages. But it does make for a good story,
I was going to
and that's
say, makes for a much better book and
yeah.
multiple rounds of edits and a quality product, because the
Yeah.
people who are editing the book are good at what they do, and so.
So writing and having had experience in different like genres like that and different things and just knowing everything that you put into the book, what is it that you would really want your readers to take away most from your stories? Like, is there certain themes that you try to stick to, like per book? I know Love and like the Love Inspired, you said they usually like you to pick um, different themes and different verses to kind of go along with it. But what would you personally like your readers to take away?
Well, my themes are not something I'd say I'm going to do this kind of story spiritual. I'm going to stick to this. I just kind of let that come out organically, if you will. And
Hmm.
but interestingly enough, it's can I speak? Interestingly enough, it's the same, pretty much the same themes. Forgiveness and trusting in God, letting go of your own controlling of your life, letting God control, and redemption. I want every story to be a redemptive story. And, I mean, that's part of the happily ever after, no matter what people go through. But there's the spiritual piece of that too, where there's closure and there's, okay, we're good with God now. We worked our way through whatever the hard situation is, because, God knows our heart. We can't hide from him. People sometimes say, well, you shouldn't ask God why. Well, I mean, why not? He knows I've got that question inside of there.
Yeah,
But let's work
totally.
through it, whether it means
Yep.
that, I just need to let go and be okay with whatever, so all of those themes come out. And then, my characters come on the page with a lot of baggage. But it's just the nature of the beast, if you will. And I know a lot of people have, especially in romantic suspense, they sometimes have trouble because the romance will happen fast. Well, I'm like,
Mm.
okay, that's romantic suspense. Okay, that is just the genre. But the other piece of that is that, like, I met my husband and in a home group, and we dated for 5 weeks, and we were engaged, and we married 3 months
Oh
later,
wow.
and
Oh,
we've
I
been
love it.
married for 35 years. So I am
Oh, God
okay.
love.
I'm okay with a fast romance, I'm okay
Yeah,
with that. So I know you didn't
absolutely.
ask that, but I went off on that.
No, I love it. Oh my gosh, I could talk about that all day. This is the romance podcast. And see, now I got to ask you
Yeah,
about how that happened. I love
yeah.
it. I love it. I think that's wonderful. And that's such a good point because sometimes you just know. Sometimes people are just, good for you and that's it. And sometimes it does happen kind of quick. Even me and my husband, we first met each other when we didn't really formally meet. We would see each other at this dance club when it was like an under 21 dance club. We were both 15 years old and staring at each other across the way every week and
Yeah.
all this. And it's so funny because then it's just weird who God puts in your life because I never forgot him. I actually had a nickname for him. I called him my boy in blue. And later on, his brother ended up marrying one of my best friends, and we were the maid of honor and best man in the wedding.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was crazy because I'm like, I know that I know you from somewhere, but I couldn't like pick it out. And then timing was off, timing was off. But if the timing was just right for us, we probably would have done the same thing. 5 weeks. That's all it takes. Sometimes it takes a
Right,
couple
right.
weeks.
No, I know. I was one of those people that got, the Lord told me that I would know my husband when I met him. And
Aw.
so we went to a group date at the State Fair of Texas. It was a group date. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night going, oh my gosh, I'm getting married. But I didn't tell
Aw.
him that, you don't do that. I didn't say, hey, God said
Yeah.
you're going to,
Yeah,
I had to let the things work out because still there was doubt. I'm like, okay, am I crazy? So anyway, like I said, it was 5 weeks later that he proposed, and because we knew. So
I love it. How did he propose? Do you mind? You don't have to tell
oh,
me.
well, he just kept talking about it. So basically he says, it wasn't like a fancy, how you read about people doing a fancy dinner on top of the roof with a violinist. It wasn't anything like
Oh,
that.
yeah, it
He
don't even
just,
have to be fancy. I think it's better
yeah,
when it's
yeah.
not fancy.
Yeah, he just kept saying, I want to get married. I want to get married to you. And of course, here
Aw.
I was thinking that, I'm supposed to marry him. He's the guy, but I kind of like pushed back. I'm
Yeah,
like,
well,
I'm
it's
not
scary.
I'm not really ready. Yeah, exactly. I'm
Yeah, it's
not really
scary.
ready. And so, but I had to work through with prayer and like, okay, is it really you, Lord? Even though, like I said, I knew that it was, but it's a huge commitment. It's a huge scary. And so we have 4 children and been married
Aw.
35 years, and it's better now than it ever was at the beginning. You work through, you get your chocolate chunk ice cream. you work you work through the hard stuff.
Yes, marriage and chocolate chunk ice cream, and you'll be good. That's it. You find
Exactly.
that guy that God is putting on your heart for sure. Oh my gosh. That's so true though, to be honest. I mean, absolutely. We need a little sweet treat, but it's funny how I always would hear people say like how they love each other more each day. And that's I totally feel you. My husband and I've been married 12 years this year. But together for about 15. But it is like that because you start to know you have this partner and you start to know this person like you just do life together, right? Like this is
Right.
like your best friend and you just can't do it really without
Yeah.
them. I mean, they're meant
Yeah.
to be your partner and all everything, and it's just it's really a
I mean, it's not
beautiful
all
thing.
roses. I mean,
Right.
it's hard. It's very hard. But now, I just say, it's time is short. I don't want to waste another moment fighting
Yeah.
over this or being disagreeing over this or being unhappy about this. I just want to have joy and I just let it go. But it took me decades to get there, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. It's still taking me time to get there. My
Yeah.
husband is like that more so than me. I try I feel the same. It's like literally the same thing like you just said. Like it's time you start to see things in life that happen, right? Cuz everybody
hmm
has baggage,
hmm
everybody has trouble, everybody,
Right.
there's tragedies. I mean, there's things that just happen that you're like, "Man, life is too short to be stewing about this
Right.
stupid thing."
Right.
And
Right.
you're so absolutely right when about that. And that's yeah, you start to see it more. And just honestly, I think it's just experience that takes you through that. Cause me 20 years ago would have been like fighting all crazy and like,
Yeah, I'm making my
like,
stand. I'm making my stand
yeah,
and I'm not budging and I'm gonna
right.
win. I'm like, why? Why? I don't know
I
why.
know.
It's
It's
just
so true.
all and then I look back and think of, oh gosh, all that time I wasted, and so I don't know, maybe it's just comes with experience, like you said, with age. And
Yeah.
so that's why I don't when I read a romance novel, romantic suspense, whatever, I am all on board with romance. I don't care how fast it happens.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I care how slow. I'm like, come on.
I know.
That's what happens. Come
Kiss
on.
already, you
Exactly.
almost kissed. I know. It's funny because usually I don't mind the slow burn a little bit. I kind of like the friends to lovers trope, and it usually is
Mhm.
like kind of a slow burn. But I'm starting to like the faster pace. It doesn't bother me at all. As long as it's like just written well. Like it can be written well and be fast. It doesn't mean that it's not like I actually just wrote a novella and my editor was like, "Oh, this is too quick." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're
Oh
right. They're way
yeah.
too
Yeah.
fast."
Yeah.
And she was right. It was just too much. It was like you didn't do enough. There wasn't enough tension before.
Yeah.
Um,
That
so I
makes
get
sense.
that. But yeah, I
But
don't mind it either way.
I think in romantic suspense novels, though, it's harder because the focus is not the whole thing is not the romance.
Right.
It's on the suspense. So some people, I've heard an editor even say that, oh, how can they be thinking about this when they're in the middle of this? And I'm going to say it was a guy editor. And I'm just like, you just don't get it. Okay. You don't get the genre. I'm sorry. This is just me being transparent here. I'm just being honest.
Yes, for
It's what
sure.
it is. Women love that. We love that. We love the
They
danger
love
and
it.
it puts them in the crucible, like it ramps everything up to, be much more than it was. So it's just part of the
Absolutely,
genre.
100%. And when the tension is so high, there's that like romantic tension too. And then there's the, like it
Yeah.
just you and especially in a lot of the suspense novels, you have like these really strong, capable women. And then, whatever in certain things that they're lacking, the guy is making up for and vice versa. And they're like helping each
Right.
other. And it's like, oh, intense,
Yeah.
they gotta make
It makes
quick
the emotions,
decisions.
yeah, and it makes the emotions ramp up and everything happens. It
Hmm.
just happens faster because and you're doing something with this person that you would never do with anybody else in any other situation. I don't know. It just makes to me, I'm a romantic suspense lover. And so I love the genre and that's just how it is. And I suggest if you don't like that, you just have to go read a different kind of story, like a romance, a longer romance, right?
Right, right, right. Sweet, like a sweet contemporary maybe if it's a little bit slower
Or a
pace or
historical
something.
romance, because those can take
Historical.
you know, they can take a very long time, depending on what it is. Like a lot of times the World War II historical romance, I consider those to even be suspenseful. They're so filled with yeah, so much action and suspense. A lot of times, um, and the
Oh
romance can
yeah.
happen fast there.
Some of the ones that I didn't even know existed because I've always been just like the contemporary, but I have gotten into so many, especially meeting all the you wonderful people, like meeting you and different authors. I'm like, man, your book is amazing. Like everything is like on my TBR list now. And one that was pretty interesting was a dual timeline novel, like with the
Hmm.
contemporary and the historical. Those are so
Right.
interesting.
Uh-huh. They
Yeah, I
are.
when I talked to Heidi Chevroli, and I was like, I'm gonna start reading her Freedom's Ring. It was like I think it was her first novel,
Hmm.
and oh my gosh, it was so neat, and it's faster paced with because you're like flipping right from like those different viewpoints and
Right.
stuff.
Right.
Oh, it's so
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah. I love those. Those are awesome.
Yeah, so interesting. I never even knew. Like I never even, you just kind of stay like you say, you find something you like and you just kind of stay in your lane. And I'm like, I'm kind of veering off and I'm digging it.
Well, I'm glad you're on board. I was going to say romantic suspense genre, I think, can be very hard to write because um, really because of what we were just talking about, the romance. Because some readers are going to want more suspense. Some
Mm.
readers are gonna want more romance. And then in my case, I write 50-50, and this two different readers will read the same book and come away thinking, oh, it had too much or it had too little, that kind of thing. So,
Oh yeah.
over time, I just had to decide I'm just going to write you can't please everybody, and you just
Yeah.
cannot write your book to please everybody. But I decided I'm going to write my stories, the stories that I write and what I would like to read. And I will find my readers, the people who like my books, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
in that way, I think that they are hard to write. The reason I even, kind of segued off onto that is because you're talking about the dual time. And I was thinking, how hard that would be to write because
Oh
you have
yeah.
two different stories and one is a historical, and of course I started out trying to write historical, but all of the research, I
Oh,
couldn't
I
even
know.
imagine going back to that right now because you've got to know what forks and knives what utensils they even use depending on the year. You've got to know everything about their dress and everything. That's a lot. And then the
Mhm.
suspense piece, or the contemporary piece, is also a lot of research. I know in the suspense, writing romantic suspense is hard because we've got to come up with this new, there's nothing new under the sun, but you
Mhm.
want to come up with some sort of plot, some sort of premise, and characters that will give your readers a lot of twists and turns, and they won't be able to see the ending coming. So that is really hard because
It's
there's
very
like,
hard.
how many books have people read? How many movies have people seen? Is there anything new that they can't figure out? So it's just everything is a mountain to climb. Every book is a mountain to climb.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I feel like with suspense too, it's tough. Even Diane Mills, she whenever I talked to her, she said about something like there's a lot of things that the internet can give you, but when you're talking suspense and like CIA, FBI, all this like
Yeah, you can't.
intense kind of things, you can't really. I mean, it's they're
Hmm.
only so forthcoming. So she was sharing that she's like part of a couple groups, like local
Right,
groups and different things, because it's you have to fill in a lot of gaps because there really
right.
isn't, you're not going to get even historical, like you said, doing the research with that. Whenever I talked to Tracy Peterson, she said that there was even fake news even then. So you have to like
Oh my
wade
goodness,
through.
really?
Yeah, she was
I
saying
guess
that.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
you have to like, I can't even imagine how hard that would be to try to wade through like what's real and what didn't like what did and what didn't happen back in
Right.
like 1800s, because you have to go through all these like records and journals and different things. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's not just sitting down and writing a story real quick. It's a lot of time and effort, and it takes a lot of a lot of courage.
Oh, all the research. I remember, I think I had attended one of her courses or something at a conference, but I believe either her or Jim Peterson, her husband, who was researching for her at the time,
Oh yeah.
said that you need to have three sources. Whatever it is, you need to have three different sources, and if they all agree, then you can go with it. You can use it. So we should do
Yes.
that today, but we won't go there.
I know. We should follow that. That's a very smart way to do things. I know. It's so crazy. But yeah, it would definitely be tough, especially like on the suspense side. But like you said, I'm glad that you follow your heart because your stories are amazing. People love you. You have sold so many books. You have just a wonderful catalog of different things, which I will certainly link to in the show
Thank
notes.
you.
Follow your heart because God put in you a very special gift that is yours. You have a very special, unique experience, as a mom and going through your life and just the different things that you've experienced, and it's going to be different. It's hard to find your own voice, like you said, to find your own space, but I'm glad that you're following that. You're following that call. It is hard. I mean, especially when you're young and you're like feeling it and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to do this, but yeah, I'm glad that
Yeah.
you did. And I'm sure a lot of readers and listeners right now are saying the same thing. That they're very glad
Well,
that you followed
thank
that
you.
call. Yeah, for
Well, it
sure.
took me a long, long time, and I don't know, if I had the years ago the opportunity just to put to be an indie author, to put my book out
Mm,
there on my own. I don't know what road that I would take, but I feel like the road that I took, made me a better writer for it because I
mhm.
had to work so hard, for the various publishers, and then even getting accepted and making the right proposals and doing all the things, just constantly working. I mean, it's been many years. So, everybody's got a different journey. So
Mhm.
I just am grateful that sometimes I just can't even believe, I mean, who would have thought? I wouldn't have thought this. And I reconnected with one of my best friends from school, elementary school. We were best friends on day
Aw.
one in first grade, and I mean, even through college. But then, I moved and years and this and that. So we just reconnected, and she just was so surprised to see that I was a writer. I sent her all these books. She
Aw.
says, "You know what? This and that and marine biologist, but writing? No, I just had no idea." Isn't it funny? I'm like, okay, well, I mean, it's one of those things inside, sometimes there's gifts hidden inside of us that
Oh, yeah.
people don't know about, but God does. And so, we just have to follow that call.
100%. I just a little tidbit, marine biologist. I used to want to be a marine biologist as well. I remember seeing Free Willy and I'm like,
Oh,
"No, I have to save these whales." And that was it. And that was like what I
yeah,
wanted to do for the longest time,
yeah,
but I didn't
I
live
know.
close to a
Yeah, right.
aquarium, you know?
Well, for
So,
me, it was watching Jacques Cousteau. I mean, that might give
oh,
away my
okay.
age because I don't know if he
Oh.
was on, but it was Jacques Cousteau, and yeah, he would go diving, and it was just amazing. And my wall was covered. One wall was covered with all of the sea creatures in the ocean, and the other wall was covered
Aw,
with planets because I had these dual things I wanted to do. Right.
I love it.
Living in Texas, of course, we have a coast, but we were up in East Texas. But I had been planning to go to school in Pensacola, I think. We would go there for the summer vacation, and I would go snorkeling, So I was really into that, really wanted to do it, but
That's cool. See, you have this innate drive to explore whatever
yes, right.
whatever medium you would have to take
Yeah.
that way, and now you can explore through your books.
That's right, and now I'm too old and too scared to actually go do anything like, jump from an airplane. I don't know. It's just we live in the mountains, and I don't wanna drive on a mountain road. I get really scared to drive up on the high mountain roads, but I put that in my book all the time. I put that, because it's a very scary experience, and so, I can just
Yes.
write about it. I don't have to do it.
You can write about it after research, and then when you think about it, you can get some chocolate chunk ice cream. Let me tell you, I feel you. I would not no. The high mountains, nope, I can't.
No, but I
Because
love
looking over the
mountains, though.
side
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, yeah, beautiful, for sure, but looking over the side, absolutely not. Too scary. I'm not a heights
Yeah.
person either. Um, anyway, we are almost at time, so why don't you talk a little bit about your new book coming out, your book, Storm Warning?
All right, yeah. Well, I now live in beautiful Washington State, and that's kind of an answer to prayer too. I thought when I lived in Louisiana that I would never see the Olympic National Forest, and here we are. So
Oh.
I really wanted to set a story on the Washington coast, the stunning Washington coast.
Oh.
All of my book, my books setting is really what inspires me, and I see something beautiful. I'm like, I need to set a story here and just really portray God's amazing creation. And so Hidden Bay is a fictional bay I set along the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State. And it's just got amazing rocky coast. And it's called Storm Warning. And in the first book, my character's name is Remy Grant. And she is hiding at a storm watching lodge. From something that happened to her a couple of years ago, but she can't remember what it was. She just knows that
Oh.
she's in danger. So she's there hiding, and she runs into someone else who's come to the lodge. He's a former military pilot. So, as I said, my characters have a lot of baggage. So he's there, and he's got his own path, and he's running from some catastrophic event in his own life. And so their paths cross, and he saves her life, and the next thing you know, someone's trying to kill her, and
Mm.
then the worst storm in the decade hits. And I love adding nature to the story, because it really ramps up the suspense. So the worst storm in the decade hits with the king tides, and they're running around through the rainforest from someone trying to kill them, and it just kind of ramps up and keeps going. And all my stories, I really try to tie in what's happening with the characters to have it all come back around to they're tied together,
Mhm.
mysteriously tied together. So anyway, it's just a heart-stopping thriller, if you will. And I've added a lot of psychological intrigue. So it could even
Mm.
potentially be a psychological thriller. So, and because it's on the Washington coast and it's set at a storm watching lodge, something I didn't talk about that novel that I wrote at 14, but it
Mhm.
was a little bit of a gothic story with a an old house sitting on a cliff of a rocky beach with a storm coming in. And so I kind of, I did that here. I was like, I gotta do that again. I've got to write that story that I never actually finished writing. I'm trying to think. I think that's it. So it's book one, and book two is coming out really fast because I'm writing 2 books a year for Rebel instead of just one. So it's going to be coming out in July, and then the last book will be in February, and then I start a new series already. I've already signed a
Wow.
contract for a new series, so I'm already thinking about the next series, because if I'm going to be writing that fast for them, I've got to have my stories lined up. What's coming next?
For sure, for sure. That's a lot, but I'm
Yeah.
sure your readers are excited because that is amazing. And that sounds unbelievable. It sounds so thrilling. Especially, I love that you took elements of your story from when you were younger. That sounds
Yeah.
so neat. Like this
Yeah.
house, I
Mhm.
immediately pictured it whenever you were
Yeah.
saying like this house on a
Good,
cliff,
good.
like it's all
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
misty and it's like black, dark
Right,
night,
right.
totally.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to say that I'm actually writing my third book right now, and I shouldn't really say this, but it's a lot of fun because involves a ghost ship. So So you're
Oh,
picturing that house on the cliff, and I don't know. So it's just a lot of fun. I'm having fun as I write, even though it's
good.
also a lot of work.
It is a lot of
Everyone
work.
knows
It's
that, yeah.
busy. But yes, I'm happy that you're having fun because it sounds amazing and it definitely sounds like fun to write. Um, where can we find you and where would the listeners and readers be able to get a copy of this wonderful book?
Well, I am at elizabethgoddard.com. I'm actually having my website's going to be redone to go with the new book coming out. But all of my social media is on there, and those little, buttons that you find at the top of the website. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, or X, I guess it's X now. And really, you can get the book everywhere books are sold. The best place really to get it is Baker Book House. Anyway, everywhere books are sold, but I'm sending people to Baker Book House if they can.
Awesome. Awesome. And I would definitely have links to all of those in the show notes. So everybody that is listening, you could just click right below and go and order Elizabeth's wonderful book. Before we go, Elizabeth, if you don't mind, I usually like to ask our guests about if they have a special Bible verse that really encouraged them or encourage the characters that you use during the theme, building the theme to your story. Was there a Bible verse that really resonated with you?
Well, what I put in the book is that kind of because of the waves crashing in the ocean, and I just wanted to have Bible verses that really talked about the power of
Mm,
God.
hmm.
And I have a Bible verse that I used in the book is Psalm 93, 3 and 4. If I can find it right here, it just talks about the waves roaring and God is on his throne. Just
Ah,
the ocean is roaring, the waves are crashing, and God is on his throne. I mean, he moves mountains, he makes the waves roar. And so I really tried to point readers to him in the book with, you know, God's beauty and even sitting from his throne, he is full of grace and mercy and forgiveness.
that's beautiful. And that's what a good picture, a perfect picture having that setting, like you said, like the setting being very important. Yeah, that's absolutely 100% true. He is
Thank you.
always there and he is very we often forget, I know I personally do, about his power all the time. He's so powerful. Saying these prayers
Right.
like, God, can I kind of have this? I really like this, or I want to do this,
Yeah.
and then you forget, like, yeah, he can make it happen. So,
Right.
yeah, absolutely. And he's certainly done that in your life for sure. I love that he has guided you to where you are today.
Yes, I
And
give him all the glory.
yes. Well, you could definitely it takes a lot of courage to be obedient. It really does. So I don't sell yourself short, Elizabeth. You've done a wonderful job. But yeah, no, thank you so much. I will definitely have links to your website and everything in the show notes. And I am just so grateful to have had the chance. Thank you for sharing your heart today. And
Thank you.
yeah, just sharing your story. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me and letting me talk for so long and ramble on and on.
Oh my gosh, it was not rambling at all.
It
No.
was
It
interesting.
was wonderful. Yes,
It
for
was
sure.
great to be able to tell my story. Yes, thank
Good.
you.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with one book lover like yourself. We love to bless as many people as we can with exclusive interviews and, of course, great books. Each month, we host a themed book giveaway where you can win a selection of Christian romance novels and some extra goodies, too. This month's theme is International Love. We're giving away 5 heartwarming Christian romance books filled with love, second chances, and faith, set in breathtaking locations like Ireland, Scotland, France, and beyond. Whether you're listening right as this episode comes out or in the future and don't want to miss out on the giveaway, no worries. You'll find the link to the current giveaway on our website, christianromancepodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, keep your faith, share the love, and happy reading.